Hello and welcome to another video from the only source of information that you need to not only survive the current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most profound verses in the entire Bible. It's not the first time I've talked about it, but it just seems like probably people need a reminder, and there's people that's new to my channel have never heard this information, so I feel like this is a good time to bring up the subject again. And that's John chapter 1 and verse 1. I was talking to a man last week and explaining to him that the best way to find out what's in the Bible is to find the verses that the churches are arguing about and then look at those verses as they were originally written in Hebrew and Greek. And John chapter 1 and verse 1 is a very good example of how this works, because it's the proof text for Trinitarians. You know, the Bible has maybe a dozen verses that seem to be about Jesus being God, but almost every one of those verses has over time been determined to be false. In other words, verses that were added to the Bible by the Catholic Church as recently as like the 12th century or so, and verses that were just altered just enough to make it seem as if it's talking about Jesus being God. But John chapter 1 and verse 1 to this day is pretty much accepted as accurately translated, and even the churches that say that God is not a Trinity struggle with disproving this verse. So this is what you have. All of the Trinitarian religions translate the verse as, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, in the verses that follow, it talks about Jesus being the Word. And so it seems as if this verse about the Word is actually about Jesus, and it specifically calls the Word God. Well, in other versions of the Bible, it says that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. Now, ancient Greek does not work like English. If we want to say a God, we have to put a in there. But in the ancient Greek, especially as this verse is recorded, the a is understood. And we can prove this to ourselves by looking at other verses that use the word a, and when we look at them in Greek, it's, you know, it just looks just like John 1:1. So John 1:1 is about the Word being a God, not being the creator. But over the years, I've taken that stand that this is a God. It's not the God, it's a God. But that's not really important, because the whole verse is not even really about Jesus. It's about the Logos. It's not even about a word, because the word, there are Greek words that could be translated as word, but the word that's used here is Logos. Outside of the Bible, it is understood that whenever you see the word Logos, it means logic. In fact, that's where we get our English word logic, is from the Greek word logos, almost spelled the same. So why is it that only the Bible translates this word logos as word when everybody else translates it as logic? Because if you look at the verse in the original Greek, as it should be translated into English, what it says is, in the beginning there was logic, and God was logical, and logic itself was a God. Wow. I mean, for me, that seems like a really important concept. It makes me feel better about myself, because I live in a world where I live by a system of logic, and I don't fit in because the world does not exist according to a system of logic. And so you know, if you don't know that this verse is in there and you're going to church, you're going to feel bad about yourself because you don't fit in with the other church members. And you know, you look at all these church rules and you think, why in the world would God want that? Well, the fact is, he doesn't. The churches want that. You know, if you're a logical person, you're going to just walk away from religion eventually. And and so, you know, basically, if you look at what it's saying, you know, in the beginning there was logic. Well, it's assumed that just by that statement that currently there isn't logic. You know, in the beginning there was logic, but that's not the way it is now. In the beginning, God was logical, but that's not the way it is now. And in fact, logic itself was a God, but that's not the way it is now. That's what the verse is saying. Now, the problem with that, if you're reading it and you're reading the whole thing, you can understand, you know, okay, in the beginning there was logic. There isn't any logic now. You can see that with your own eyes. Okay, obviously, you know, we live in a world where people are killing all the plants and animals to make junk. That's obviously not logical. But the next part where it says that God was logical, then you think, well, why isn't God logical now? And so we're going to look at some scriptures to kind of explain what that's about. And the first one is 1 John chapter 5 and verse 19. And you can look this up yourself. 1 John 5:19. We know that we are of God, and all of civilization lies under the control of the evil one. Okay, so we're of God, but the whole world lies under the control of the evil one being Satan. And James chapter 4 and verse 4 says, don't you know that being friends with civilization makes you enemies with God? And that word civilization is translated as world in most verses. I translated as civilization. The word is actually cosmos. And the cosmos can mean planet Earth. In fact, it's where we get our word cosmos, which is all of space. But it's obvious when you're reading the Bible that every place where the word cosmos is found is not about planet Earth, but about human society. You know, we talk about human society as if it is as civilization. That's what civilization is. It's human society. And so it only makes sense that if you're going to translate the Bible accurately, that you use the word civilization at these verses. Now, here's the really good one. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4. There's a lot of light on that. I don't know if you can see that. I can't see it in my viewfinder. 2 Corinthians 4:4. The God of this time period, this era, this time period, has blinded the minds of those who do not believe. And obviously, the God of this time period is the same God spoken of in the other verses as the God of civilization. And in fact, in the verse where it says, in the beginning, God was logical, it's understood that the God that is not logical is the God of civilization, the God of this world, the wicked God that is evil. That would be Satan, or Lord Satan, depending on how you feel about him. So there you go. John chapter 1 verse 1 is simply saying that logic no longer exists. It's no longer used. The God of civilization is not logical, and logic is not at the top of the human hierarchy. It's not. Logic is no longer a God. But throughout the Bible, the promise is held out that one day Satan will be removed from his position. Jesus Christ will return, and once again, the world will be logical. God will be logical. And every decision we make will be based on the instincts put into us at creation. Logic. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.